Hi, everyone. It is 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so I will get us started. And then if people join in as they go, that's totally okay. So I want to thank everyone for joining for our final free webinar as part of celebrating Occupational Therapy Month. We're so excited that there's been so much interest in what we've been offering this month and that people have taken the time out of their busy schedules to help us celebrate everything that occupational therapy is and does, helping us to educate more and more people on what it is that we do. Because if there are any occupational therapists on the line, sometimes we still get those questions. What is occupational therapy? So we've hopefully, if you've been to a couple of these sessions, hopefully been giving some good information about some of the different aspects of what it is that we do, and specifically what we do at Gowan Consulting. There is a lot more. We could spend a whole year putting these on, but I'm glad that you've been able to join us for this month. So for today, I will be presenting on the role of occupational therapy in ergonomics. My name is Lauren Stacy. I am an occupational therapist. I am registered in the province of Alberta, so I'm joining you from a very chilly and snowy Calgary at the moment. But I do work with Gowan Consulting, working with our clients that are based out west in Western Canada. And then I am also the training manager as well. So I oversee a lot of these different webinars and oversee our program that we do offer in terms of different education sessions for employers as well as clinicians. So I'm happy to be here today. Before I get started, in the spirit of reconciliation, I did want to start us off with a land acknowledgement. And so I wanted to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina, the Iyare Nakota Nations, the Otipemisiwak Métis government of the Métis Nation within the Alberta District 6, and all people who make their homes in Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. So I feel very privileged to be here today and enjoy everything that this land that I live, work, and play on has to offer. Okay, so for the goals of the presentation today, what I really want to help everyone on the line understand is the scope of ergonomics in the workplace. Sometimes, or I guess most of the time when I interact with employees or employers, they have a general sense of ergonomics. It is something that's talked about quite a bit in the context of health and safety within the workplace. But sometimes that scope is a little bit narrow in the sense that we think of ergonomics as strictly a physical issue or intervention. And so I want to broaden that scope a little bit, give everyone a really good baseline understanding of what we do as occupational therapists when we're called in to do an ergonomic assessment and intervention. I want to talk a bit about the benefits of proper ergonomics for employees and the company. This is some really great information if you're someone within your organization trying to advocate for better ergonomics or an ergonomics program, or to have someone like myself or occupational therapists come in to assist the organization or individual employees. And then I want to give everyone a good understanding of the role that us as occupational therapists have in terms of the ergonomic assessment and the intervention in terms of recommendations and follow-up. So to get us started, let's define what ergonomics is. So ergonomics, in a basic sense, is the science that's devoted to designing jobs and workplaces in ways that help to maximize employee effectiveness within their role and within the organization, minimize the possibility of harm or injury, and minimize defects and maximize quality. So when I think about ergonomics, what I really truly think about and how it boils down is we're trying to fit the workplace, as well as to an extent, some of the work demands to the person. So we're not trying to take every single person and fit them into the same type of workplace. We're trying to make sure that the environment is as supportive as possible of the employee. When we think about ergonomics, we want to know that when ergonomics are implemented appropriately, they can help to enhance our employees' health, their safety, and their well-being. By doing this, we allow the employees to work healthy for longer, avoid physical injury, and in turn, improve their overall well-being. We want to enhance the usability of the workspace and the environment by improving the ease of use for the different users that are within that organization or within the environment, and to improve their learning and their ability to effectively perform the job. And then we know that when we're implementing proper ergonomics, it helps to facilitate and improve the employee's performance by improving their proficiency and efficiency and decreasing the amount of errors that someone may have or experience within any given workday. As an occupational therapist, we are truly looking at the whole person when we come in to see someone in the workplace who may be having an ergonomic issue or concern. We understand that when someone's having pain, it can impact not just their physical health, but their overall health. So we want to make sure that we're getting that full picture and we're understanding the person and their health history, but also the demands of their job, how the environment is set up, and how they interact with their environment. In addition, so there's a lot that goes into ergonomics. So to continue on, we want to make sure that when we're considering an ergonomic assessment and intervention, that we're able to accommodate for various different physical sizes, various different capabilities and skills, and knowledge and experience of the employees. So those different aspects will influence the potential recommendations that we give. We want to, in doing so, we recognize that ergonomics is unique to each individual. So again, it comes back to that idea that we're fitting the workplace to the person, not the person to the workplace. So we can't have a one-size-fits-all when it comes to implementing ergonomic equipment. Generally, there's certain guidelines or parameters that will be able to fit, 95% of the population, but that's not always the case. And particularly if someone is experiencing new onset of illness, a change in their health condition, or a change in something that's going on personally for them or at work, then that may interfere with their ability to engage in that environment that they've been successfully engaging in before. When we are approaching ergonomics, we're doing so to be able to maintain that user performance and minimize excessive or awkward loads and postures. So we're looking at how the person is situated and positioned within the environment. We're giving them education on how to potentially alter the way that they engage with equipment or tools, as well as the way that they hold their body within that space. And what we're really, truly trying to do is optimize that interaction between the user or the employee and the workspace environment. So I'll get a little bit more into that later in the presentation about how we apply that OT or occupational therapy lens to get to that point of optimizing the interaction between the user, the environment, and then also the work itself. Next, let's talk about the types of ergonomics. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes, generally people have a basic understanding of the physical aspects of ergonomics, right? We understand that if someone has an injury or is experiencing pain, discomfort, or tension, sometimes it has to do with the physical setup. And if we make some changes to that, then sometimes those physical symptoms can go away. But one of the benefits of incorporating occupational therapy into our ergonomics intervention is that we do have background training and education in not only the physical aspects of health and function, but also cognition, psychology and mental health, visual demands. So we do truly look at an individual as a whole. And in doing so, we're able to identify how to create that optimal fit that we mentioned on the earlier slide. So to go through each of these categories or types, physical ergonomics is the most commonly known form of ergonomics, and it typically deals with the physical load that's placed on the human body when performing activities. So understanding physical ergonomics and how to integrate it heavily influences on-site safety. So when we're thinking about the physical piece, oftentimes we're talking about it in the context of safety in performing particularly the physical demands of someone's job. Usually, what we commonly see is that if physical ergonomics is disregarded in the setup of the environment or the setup of the work tasks, our employees or our workers may develop musculoskeletal injuries or disorders. In terms of cognitive ergonomics, this is a method of designing and arranging information and data to create a lighter cognitive load. So in this sense, we're looking at how someone's work demands is set up from a cognitive perspective, how information is being presented to them, with the types of cognitive information that they are engaging with in their given workday. And so when we think about cognitive ergonomics, we're looking at someone's perception, their memory, reasoning skills and abilities, and how all of those things, and there's many more, but all of those things affect how someone interacts with and performs their work. And what we know is that a higher cognitive workload typically causes more stress on the worker. And then that can have a direct influence on their postures, the amount of tension they hold in their body, and then it can translate into something physical. What's coming out more and more recently is that when it comes to psychological demands of work, individuals who report feeling high levels of stress are also more likely to report physical discomfort and muscular discomfort. So these psychological factors that go into someone's work can include things like deadline pressures, lack of control or autonomy over their work, if they have supervisory responsibilities, and if there's a high level of accountability that's placed on them. All of these things, depending on the intensity of them, can impact how that person's body behaves by increasing the different types of applied forces put on the body, influencing awkward postures, and static loading of muscular tension. So if we think about it, all of us on the line have likely experienced different levels of stress within our work and our work demands or work day. And all of us likely experience that stress differently in our body, but we all do experience it in our body. So we may be someone who increases or raises our shoulders, almost wears our shoulders like earrings. We may clench our fists or our jaw. We may slouch forward, right, and lose that awareness of our body and kind of go into more of this protective posture. So all of those things, again, just like the cognitive demands, can influence the physical body. And then when it comes to visual ergonomics and visual demands, this refers to a lot of different factors in the environment that impact someone's ability to see and perceive the details of a given task within the workplace easily and accurately. So vision and lighting is something that we always consider when implementing our recommendations and doing our assessments in order to better design the environment for that specific individual to not only maximize their efficiency and decrease the load on the individual, but also promote their visual health as well. I want to give us some context as to why ergonomics is important. So one of the ways that we can do that is talking a little bit about some statistics that we have around musculoskeletal disorders in particular within the workplace. So musculoskeletal disorders, or MSD, on this slide has been identified as the most common work-related health problem and one of the leading causes for health-related absences from work. A recent study that I was reviewing found that each year in the United States, about 600,000 people lose time at work due to a musculoskeletal disorder, which can result in $15 to $20 billion being spent on workers' compensation directly related to the musculoskeletal disorder and the poorly designed workstation that they were working in. So there's a very high cost to the employer and to the workers' compensation system when we're not addressing factors or hazards within the workplace that influence musculoskeletal disorder and injuries. Over 40% of workplace injuries are sprains and strains, which are classified as those musculoskeletal disorders. In addition, if we take it kind of outside of work, 30% of non-work related injuries are also related to sprains and strains. So it's very common for us to see. And then what we also know is that earlier intervention to address musculoskeletal disorders or injuries has better outcomes, especially 2 years post initial injury date. So early intervention is fantastic in showing better outcomes. Ideally, by implementing ergonomics programs, we're able to get ahead of it. We're able to prevent these types of injuries from happening. And so if we want to take a proactive approach in order to reduce the costs, right, then implementing ergonomics is a great way to go about that. Another thing we know in terms of statistics is that the indirect costs associated with an injury within the workplace can be up to 5 times the direct cost of the injury itself. So outside of just the healthcare costs, things like cross-training to cover that individual if they need time off of work, the time that the supervisor or employer needs to put into reporting the incident and doing that paperwork associated with it. Those costs can be 5 times the amount of the actual injury itself. And one important point that I want to get across is that these economic as well as human costs of musculoskeletal disorders are in a lot of cases unnecessary because they can be prevented. So there's a lot of things that we can implement within the workplace in order to prevent a lot of these injuries from occurring. Injury prevention is critical to proactively maintain a healthy workforce. So there are so many employees who work daily experiencing pain or tension from musculoskeletal disorders, which can have a major impact on their comfort, their productivity, their likelihood of maintaining that employment. So we want to address these things as proactively as we can. Here's just a kind of brief list of some examples of when I'm talking about musculoskeletal disorders or injuries, what it is I'm talking about. So essentially what I want to give everyone a sense of is that it can range across the body, right? So if we're talking about office workers, a lot of the things that we see are in the upper extremities. So challenges with their hands, their wrists, their arms, shoulders, neck, and then due to prolonged sitting at times can lead to issues with their back as well. Depending on the environment that they're in, the types of musculoskeletal injuries will differ. So if someone is working in more of a labor intensive job, you may see more injuries further down the chain. And then depending on the risk associated with the job, there may be sprains and strains, or there may be some more catastrophic injuries, depending on the setup and the fit between the worker and the workplace. So what are some symptoms of musculoskeletal disorders? What's a good indication of maybe that something is developing within yourself, right, or an employee that may result in some type of diagnosis down the road? So some common symptoms of MSDs would be that the individual is experiencing pain, muscle tightness, joint stiffness, swelling in a particular area of the body. They may be experiencing tingling or numbness. They may have muscle weakness as well. And then other things like decreased grip strength or decreased range of motion. All of these are symptoms associated with musculoskeletal disorders or injuries. So the reason I put these on here is because sometimes an injury is a result of a specific event. But in a lot of cases, it's due to repetitive exposure to a specific workplace hazard, which could be a hazard as simple as improper or awkward postures. So some of these symptoms may be a gradual onset, and might not be an all of a sudden someone is experiencing something. So it's a really good idea to have an idea of what some of these symptoms might be so that you can catch them earlier even within yourself. So I'm talking about these hazards or these risks within the workplace. What am I referring to? Well, within the workplace, we have these different risk factors that are generally considered within the literature and guides on ergonomics as the things that we most commonly see. So first of all, we have this idea of force. So force refers to the amount of physical effort that's required to perform a task, such as heavy lifting, or to be able to manipulate and maintain control of equipment or tools. The amount of force that someone has to apply to be able to engage with the work demand or the equipment or tools depends on the type of grip they have to use, the weight of the object, the body posture that they have to assume in order to do that task, and then the type of activity and the duration of the task. When it comes to repetition, we're talking about repetitive movements. So an example of this would be, repetitive keyboarding by using the keyboard to type, repetitive mousing, right? So depending on how that person is using and engaging with the mouse, they may have repetitive twisting or rotation through the wrist. And typically repetition is that kind of continuous effort for a prolonged period of time. We have awkward or sustained postures, such as bending or standing still for a long period of time, reaching outside of what we consider to be a safe reach zone, depending on the load that someone may be picking up or carrying to do so. In addition, we have contact stress as a risk factor. So contact stress refers to putting certain parts of our body into contact with surfaces that could impact nerve function. It could impact our circulation. So a really, really classic example of this within an office setting is someone who's resting their wrist against the edge of their desk. Or what we commonly see is those mouse rests that have that kind of gel component to it. We typically don't like to see those because what it causes is that person to rest their wrist on it, and typically for prolonged periods of time, which can impair circulation and cause some kind of compression through, in particular, when we're talking about the wrist, our carpal tunnel. which can lead to issues down the road. We also have environmental issues. So someone who's working in extreme temperatures. Right now in Calgary, it's minus 16 outside. So some people might consider that extreme, but if someone's not equipped with the proper equipment, then that could lead to some issues down the road. In addition, it's really slippery and icy outside, so if someone doesn't have proper footwear, that's a hazard or a risk factor. Vibration, so someone who's using something like a jackhammer or even something like a sandblaster for prolonged periods of time, that can lead to some musculoskeletal disorders. And then we have work schedule. So this isn't always for sure a risk factor, but it's something that we consider and look at and gather information on in our assessments to understand if it is a potential risk factor. So looking at whether someone is part-time versus full-time, the hours that they're working per day, the days that they're working per week, how much overtime is expected of them, and then breaks. Are they taking them? Things like that. And then organizational stressors. So what are the job demands? What are the relationships like within the organization? Is there flexibility within the environment or within the job itself? And then the different standards associated with ergonomics, but also work performance. Shifting gears a little bit, what are some ergonomic principles? So when we're completing our assessment with an employee, these are the things that we're doing our best to implement as we go through and provide our recommendation or our intervention. So we're trying to reduce the amount of force. We're trying to reduce repetition, reduce vibration, ensure that someone is working at the proper height for the work that they're performing. And there's different standards associated with that, but unfortunately we don't have the time to go through today. Ensuring that they're using the proper tools and that the tools, if possible, are adapted to that unique individual user. That things are kept in the proper locations, again, to reduce awkward postures and things like going outside of those safe reach zones. We look at how we can use the best option. So instead of working harder, how do we work smarter here? Are there things that we can automate? Are there things that can be delegated or we can get additional assistance with? And then we're considering the visual and cognitive inputs that are required for the job as well, and trying to make sure that we're maintaining that visual health and also that the cognitive load is appropriate to the individual user as well. So essentially, we're trying to ensure that the health of the individual is supported by the role and the way that they're engaging within the role. We're trying to reduce the amount of effort that's required. We're trying to make sure that, again, we're working smarter and not harder in order to protect an individual's joints, their body functions, their cognitive and psychological systems. So what are the benefits of ergonomics? So one of the benefits is to reduce the injury rates for high-risk jobs. Right? So if we put the proper tools in place, then we can help to reduce those injury rates that can be commonly seen with higher risk positions. We can improve someone's productivity. So if we're able to implement recommendations, tools, equipment, whatever it is, then that can help to reduce things like discomfort, pain, tension. And what we know about pain, tension, discomfort is that that can really impair someone's ability to concentrate. Right? It can impact morale as well, all things that can really decrease someone's productivity. So if we implement interventions to address those concerns, then it will typically, what we'll see is that productivity will improve. In addition, we're reducing quality issues. So when someone is experiencing those symptoms that we talked about before for musculoskeletal disorders, what we commonly see as well is an increase in the number of errors that someone is likely to make within their role or their task. And again, that relates to just not being able to concentrate as well, decreased kind of commitment or morale associated with the position. And so we're reducing those quality issues by improving that user's experience within the environment. We're reducing things like fatigue. That can be really helpful in terms of also reducing those awkward postures that someone may fall into if they're fatigued over the course of their day. And we're improving employee morale. In addition to all of this, we talked about it a little bit earlier when we talked about statistics, but we're improving for ergonomics when we implement it appropriately. We're decreasing the amount of cost associated with injury. So there's less productive time lost by the injured worker themselves if we're able to prevent an injury from occurring. We're able to maximize coworker time as well, because now time isn't being spent assisting the injured worker. The coworkers are able to focus on the tasks that they have to complete. There's less supervisor time taken up by completing things like paperwork, assisting in training, investigating the incident, and then also going through and potentially assisting with something like a return to work program. So all of these things are important to consider when we are talking about the benefits of ergonomics within our organization. There's benefits to the individual worker, to their team, to the manager, and also to the overall organization. So across the board, there's benefits. So now I want to talk about the OT role. So we did a like a flyby of defining what ergonomics is, talking about musculoskeletal disorders, the things that influence them or the risk factors for them, how they show up in the body. And now I want to talk about what we do within Gowan Consulting or within occupational therapy in general as well. So what you'll see on the screen here is what we often refer to in occupational therapy as the PEO model, or the person, environment, occupation model. So I put this up here to really reinforce that when us as occupational therapists are approaching ergonomics, we're not just looking at one aspect of this picture. When we go in to work with an employee, we're collecting information about the person, their capabilities, their health history. We're getting information about the environment, how it's currently set up, and how they're interacting with the current setup of the environment. And we're also collecting information about the occupation. So things like the tasks that they have to complete, the activities that they engage in. And we're looking at the interaction between all three. When there's a good fit, that optimal fit between the person, environment, and the occupation, that's when we're able to see that optimal occupational performance. So when someone's able to function at the highest level available to them is when there's that optimal fit between all three. So if we're just approaching the person and viewing them as the problem, we're going to miss a lot of information. Likewise, down the chain, if we're just looking at the environment, we're missing things. And so that's where that OT perspective can be really, really helpful when we're looking at an ergonomic intervention. Within our training as occupational therapists, we receive education on how to modify environments, how to adapt different processes. And these are things that are vital for ergonomics. In addition, we're able to look at the cognitive, physical, psychological capabilities of a unique individual by collecting information from them, as well as doing certain standardized assessments or outcome measures with them, so we can really understand where that optimal fit might be, where the gaps are in order to get there, and then what types of things can be modified at each of these three different levels to help us achieve that optimal occupational performance. So in terms of our assessment, I wanted to break it up into the different things that we look at within each of those different domains: person, environment, and occupation. So within our evaluation or our assessment, when we're considering the person, we're collecting information about their health. So things like their body functions, so neuromuscular challenges or conditions, sensory information, their visual system, their perceptual system, and then their cognition, as well as the actual body structures as well. So things like how's their cardiovascular system functioning, any respiratory concerns, any history of musculoskeletal disorders or injuries. In addition, when we're looking at the person, we're getting a general sense from them, from their self-report, but also from our objective observation, what their functional abilities and limitations currently are. In kind of part and parcel of doing that, we're getting an understanding of what their habits are, what their routines are, primarily in the workplace, but as appropriate, we may be collecting information about their general day or general life as well, what their role is, and then what their kind of cultural and social context that they live within is as well. Right? In addition, we're collecting information like height, weight, their age, whether they're right or left-handed. All of this information is really, really helpful in order for us to make, especially recommendations related to equipment or modifications to the task. And then whenever we're going in, we're taking measurements of the person. So we have lots of different templates that we can use, but we're getting a sense of the specific anthropometric measurements for that individual so that when we're recommending equipment, we're not just putting a cookie cutter chair or solution in, we're actually identifying a specific chair with some adjustable components to it to fit that individual. When it comes to the environment, we are looking, again, at things like measurements. So we're taking measurements of the workstation. We're taking measurements of various different pieces of equipment that they currently have in place. And we're looking at those in the context of the measurements we have from the individual. Is there a good fit between those things? Is there a gap? And in what area do we need to address that gap? Whether it's in terms of changing the environment, or it's hard to change the person in terms of measurements, but essentially we're looking at that good fit. We're collecting information about the current tools and equipment and resources that they have available to them. And then we're also getting a sense of the organizational support for that individual. So is the organization supportive of ergonomics? What's the experience they've had with their manager up to that point? That's just really good information for us to have in terms of how we frame our recommendations going forward as well. And then the occupation. So when we're going in there, we're not just looking at the person and the environment. We're looking at what it is that they're doing. So what are their work demands? What are the different tasks that they're doing throughout their day? When I've done ergonomic assessments, a lot of the employees or the clients that I go to see are kind of surprised that I'm asking these types of questions. And so I'm just educating them that, what you're doing and how you're interacting with the equipment, what you're using it for, can influence whether it is a good fit for you. And so it can go into my clinical reasoning and the types of recommendations I make. So I want to have a good understanding of what those work demands are and whether it's a good fit with the person, but also the tools. We're looking at the routines that are required for their occupation. Again, going into things like what's their schedule like? Are they taking their breaks? Also, how is the work split throughout the day? So is everything just focused solely on the computer? Are they in meetings all day versus are they doing data entry? Are they doing something incredibly physical for prolonged periods of time? So those are really important things for us to consider. And then whether there's flexibility and any kind of flexibility with scheduling as well in terms of the work demands, but also when they're completed throughout the day or the week. Now, when it comes to recommendations, I wanted to give a general sense of the different types of recommendations that we commonly give as part of our assessment and our intervention because it's unique to the individual. So I can't give a kind of one solution during the presentation today, but just give you a sense of when you're working with an occupational therapist, what are the types of things or kind of categories that you may expect to come back to you in terms of a report or kind of interaction with the OT. So one of the things that we may recommend and also provide would be education related to general well-being and health promotion for the individual and injury prevention. We may make recommendations around modifying or designing different work tools, equipment, and behaviors to better fit the individual and the work demands. We basically always provide education on proper body mechanics. So how is that person interacting with their tools? How are they interacting with the environment? How can we bring more awareness to what their role is in maintaining their health and their well-being? We provide, again, self-management education and strategies for the specific individual we're working with. And I have a slide that kind of goes through what that looks like and might entail. And then what we can also do is help with successful return to work after an injury. So we can make some recommendations around how to set an employee up for success if they've been away from work due to an injury or a condition that may impact their ability to perform the different work demands that are required of them. Here's a slide that just gives a bit of an example of, in particularly office settings, what some different pieces of ergonomic equipment might look like. So we're always looking at the fit between the person and their chair and making recommendations around that. Like I said, there's quite a few different ergonomic chairs on the market. And so we make sure that we're taking those measurements of the individual as well as their workplace to make sure that we're recommending a chair that fits each of those unique characteristics of the person, their environment, and their task, what it is that they're doing during the day. We're also looking at the desk setup. So we're looking at things like the shape of the desk. Are there any barriers to them being able to get in and access what they need to on the desk? Is the space adequate for the types of jobs, demands, or tasks that they're doing? Is there adjustability required in terms of surface height? Those are things that we're looking at. What you can also see on here are things like keyboards. There's a couple different types here. So we have there's standard keyboards. There's split keyboards, like you can see on the lower right of the screen. There's compact keyboards that have separate numeric keypads. There's keyboards that have larger fonts or are modified in some way to accommodate for any kind of limitations in range of motion or things like tremors. So lots of options that are available. And again, when we're looking at recommending something like a keyboard, we're really looking at that optimal fit, what's going to work best for the person, for the job task, and within their environment. We have different options for a mouse, a computer mouse. So there's a few that are shown here on the screen. There's the vertical mouse that can help to promote more optimal neutral wrist postures. There's a horseshoe mouse that we see here. And then there's also a roller mouse that can, all of which address different potential kind of requirements or needs for the individual. We're also looking at other types of input devices like headsets. So what are the demands of the job? Do they need a headset to help to prevent any types of risk factors or hazards within their day. This is just a snapshot of the different type of equipment that's available. We can look at things like lighting. I've made recommendations for different types of lighting. There's different programs or softwares that we'll recommend as well, depending on the needs of the individual. So there's so much to consider and so many options that are out there. And so within Gowan Consulting, we make sure that we have good relationships with these different types of vendors to make sure that we can consult the individuals who are the experts on the equipment so that they can help us to identify what's the best thing to also fit what we've assessed with the person, the work demands, and the environment. While I had everyone here, I did want to use this opportunity to put up, a graphic that kind of shows what an optimal ergonomic setup within an office environment might look like. So I'll gloss over this really quickly. But what we're seeing here is someone who is seated in a chair, obviously, and we see that their hips are at a 90-degree angle. Their knees aren't quite at that 90-degree angle, but that's typically what we're looking for, as well as the ankles we want to be at a 90-degree angle, with some flexibility for them to move their ankles throughout the day to promote things like circulation. We have their elbows supported by their armrest with their elbows at that, again, 90 to about 110-degree angle. We see that their wrists are relaxed and straight. They're pulled in nice and close to the workplace, so they're not reaching forward in order to access their setup. The screen is about an arm's length away. That's to promote optimal kind of, it's like the optimal visual distance for an individual, as well as the top of the screen is at eye level for them in order to ensure that their screen is within our optimal kind of visual field as well. They have a document holder here, so this is someone who engages with paperwork. They're not having to fully flex their neck downwards to look at that paperwork. It's up at a better angle for them to reduce awkward postures. There is one thing I want to note is that there is a headrest on this chair. Typically, that's not something that we would recommend with a chair unless there's specific, unique reasons to that individual to have a headrest, because we don't need someone resting their head back while they're doing their work. And then the other thing to note is that the backrest isn't quite as high as we typically like to see for an individual. We want as much as of that back supported, as well as much of the lower leg supported, to ensure that we're really supporting the body structures of that individual. This is a really quick snapshot. And like I said, there's even some things that we might change about it here. It's really hard to find that optimal setup when you're looking at different resources that are available to us online. I talked earlier about some self-management strategies that go into our recommendations. And so these can be things like providing stretches as well as different exercises that are either kind of general for what we typically see, especially with office jobs, different aches and pains associated with them, but they can also be unique to the individual as well. We can give some strategies around scheduling breaks and remembering to take breaks. What I always tell my clients is that even with the best ergonomic setup, top of the line of equipment, if you stay in one position the whole day, you're still going to run into some challenges. So we need to make sure that we're not maintaining those static positions, even if it's the best position for us, for too long a period of time. So we need to find ways to functionally integrate our breaks throughout our day. Things like hydration, making sure that someone's drinking enough water, not only good for their overall health, their cognition, but also if we're actively hydrating, we're more likely to get up from our desk in order to take washroom breaks, making sure someone's fueling properly, and then providing some education or awareness around the specific conditions that someone's reporting and their symptoms. So there's an endless list of different types of self-management strategies that we can provide, but this is a general overview, and they're always specific to the individual who we're working with. And then what I wanted to end us off on today is just reinforcing, the value of OT and ergonomics and why this is an area that we do so much work in. So, according to a study that was conducted by the Royal College of Occupational Therapists, by integrating OT into ergonomics, the cost benefit of an OT ergonomic assessment, intervention, and education over a 10-year period is $250,000. So that refers to the savings associated with one specific injury and one specific assessment. Over a 10-year period, that assessment led to savings or a cost benefit of $250,000. So that's a pretty significant figure to consider. The other things that I want us to think about is just in terms of proper ergonomics and making sure that we're addressing it from that holistic view. We're helping to reduce sickness absences within the workplace. We're helping with in terms of increasing productivity and comfort within the workplace. We're able to advise on equipment in the workplace that can benefit all users and also the specific needs of specific users. And then one of the unique things that we really do bring to this world of ergonomics is that task analysis component. So we're not just looking at the environment and the fit between the environment and the person. We're also looking at the job itself and breaking down the different tasks that are required for that position and seeing how they do truly fit with the person's capabilities, what their limitations might be, and then also with the environment. And that is it for the content of the slides. I will open up to some questions, and I see a few things in the chat. But before I do that, I just wanted to put up some resources for everyone. So these are some great places to go if you're looking for more information on ergonomics. So I'll leave that up for a second while I just look through the chat. Okay, no questions in there. I'll flip over to our next slide with some additional resources and leave that up for a second. And then if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, come off of mute. I'm happy to address anything that may have come up in the session. Yes, Sylvia, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Lauren. What a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Lots of great details. Just curious from your expertise and your opinion, in terms of, obviously there's lots of different providers of ergonomic assessments out there, and you really spoke very well to the value of occupational therapists doing these assessments. In your opinion, is that related to the fact that our training is pretty heavy in regards to the cognitive and psychological aspects, whereas some of our other professional colleagues maybe don't have that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously I'm biased because I'm an occupational therapist.
Me too.
Yeah, but I would say that that definitely plays a part in it. Like I was saying, when we think about ergonomics, a lot of people do have that more siloed view of it where it's just physical, right? Or it's just tools and equipment. And because as occupational therapists, we look at more than that. We're trained to look at more than that in any situation that we're put in. I think that our understanding of the psychological components of health and different psychological demands, as well as cognition, really play a role in how we're able to make those really unique recommendations that potentially someone without that additional background may not be able to identify. Not to say that they can't, right? If they've upskilled themselves, done that training in addition to, you know, the ergonomics training that they do. But I think that it's a unique lens that we offer. Um, all right. Other thing I wanted to do was just share some upcoming events. So we do actually offer a virtual hybrid ergonomics training about twice a year. I just did one last week with a group. So we haven't scheduled them yet for next year, but that training goes into a lot more detail about um, musculoskeletal disorders, different ergonomic risk factors. We talk about body mechanics and anatomy, and then we go through each specific component, um, each specific piece of equipment, different things like vision and lighting. So it's very comprehensive over the course of 2 days, 3 hours per day. So if that's something you're interested in, please feel free to reach out to us. And as soon as we have that scheduled, we will absolutely let you know. Upcoming as well, we do have neurodiversity in the workplace, which is a workshop coming on December 5th this year. And then we do have a cognitive demands analysis certificate training that we have scheduled for January 23rd, 24th, and 25th of early next year. So if you're interested in any of those or any of the training that we offer, because we offer a lot more than this, you can always visit our website or reach out to Gowan Health at gowanhealth.com, and we can give you all the information that you need or may be interested in. I'll just give a little bit of a plug that Gowan Consulting, we are a finalist for the Women Business Enterprise Supplier of the Year. So we're very excited about that. And I'll open it up again to questions. If there are no questions, I mean, I will stay on until our time is up at 1 o'clock Eastern. But I did just really want to express my gratitude to everyone who did join today or over the course of the month. It's amazing to see the turnout that we've had. And I hope that we can keep doing this next year as well. But yeah, just really want to express my gratitude and thanks. A lot of our OTs put a lot of effort into putting on the different presentations we've done throughout the month. So it definitely means a lot to us to have people listen to us and share what's so great about occupational therapy.